I didn't find out about my wife's betrayal from late-night phone calls or shady text messages. I didn't hear it from neighbors gossiping over fences or coworkers whispering behind my back. No, I found out because my 7-year-old son handed me a drawing. In his innocent little handwriting, he had written, "This will be our new dad." And in the picture, my wife was holding hands with some strange man, while my face had been drawn off to the side, crossed out like I didn't belong anymore. For a moment, I just froze. I stared at that paper like my whole life had been set on fire, but only I could see the flames. My son had no idea what he had just handed me. To him, it was just art class homework. But to me, it was a death sentence to the family I thought I had. Before I go further, if you like hearing true stories of betrayal and revenge, stories that will keep you hooked until the last second, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what comes next, because this story, it gets darker, smarter, and more twisted than you can imagine. At first, I told myself it had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Kids imagine things all the time, right? Maybe he just made it up. Maybe he overheard something wrong. I wanted so badly to believe that. But the detail in that drawing haunted me. The date in the corner, like it was some kind of announcement. And that line, "Mom said this will be our new dad." That night, after my son went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table staring at that piece of paper. My wife was in the shower. I could hear the water running upstairs, and I remember thinking, she has no idea I know. And that was the moment I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her yet. I wasn't going to scream or flip tables like you see in movies. That's what she would expect me to do, to explode, to look crazy, to give her a reason to play the victim later. No, I decided to be calm, patient, cold. If this drawing was real, if she was really preparing to replace me in my own son's life, then I was going to find out everything before making my move. The following days, I started noticing things I had ignored before. Her phone never left her side, not even when she went to the bathroom. She suddenly had work meetings late into the evening, even though her company usually shut down by 5. She had new clothes, new jewelry, little things I knew I hadn't bought her. And the way she looked at me, distant, like she had already decided I wasn't part of her future. That I didn't want to believe it, but the drawing kept flashing in my mind. My son wasn't the type to invent something like that. If he wrote it down, it's because he heard it from her. And that realization tore me apart. Not just because she was lying to me, but because she was involving our child in her secret life. That's when I called a lawyer. Not to file for divorce yet, but to ask questions. What could I legally do? How could I protect my son if things went bad? What steps should I take now to make sure I wasn't blindsided later? The lawyer told me something that stuck with me. Document everything. Don't confront her yet. Get your evidence quietly. So that's exactly what I started doing. I paid attention to receipts, bank statements, little details she probably thought I'd never notice. I started to piece together a timeline. Nights, she was working late. Weekends, she claimed she had girls' nights. Each one lined up with unexplained charges. Uber rides, and dinners at places we'd never gone as a family. And here's where it got interesting. The name that kept popping up on her phone bills wasn't some random stranger. It was a man I actually knew. A guy from our neighborhood. Someone who had waved at me while mowing his lawn. Someone I had even had a beer with once at a block party. My stomach dropped when I realized my wife's so-called daddy figure for my son was literally the married guy living 2 streets over. But I didn't blow up. I didn't storm into his house or scream at my wife. Instead, I smiled. I pretended nothing was wrong. Because if they thought I was blind, they'd keep making mistakes. And the more mistakes they made, the stronger my case would be. Legally, emotionally, and strategically. I was in pain. Yeah. But I also felt something else creeping in. A cold, steady fire. This wasn't going to be a story where I got crushed and left in the dirt. This was going to be the story where I quietly, carefully, and absolutely destroyed the 2 people who thought they could erase me from my own family. And it all started with a child's drawing. After that night, I couldn't look at my wife the same way. She still smiled at me in the mornings, still kissed me on the cheek before walking out the door, but I knew every gesture was fake. It was like living in a movie where the main character doesn't realize she's already been caught. And I played along, pretending to be the clueless husband, while in reality, every sense I had was tuned to her every move. The advice from my lawyer echoed in my head. Document everything. So I became an observer in my own house. Every late return, every excuse, Every forgotten detail, I wrote it down. I kept a hidden notebook inside my briefcase. It wasn't about paranoia. It was about control. If I couldn't stop her lies, at least I could own the truth. One evening, she told me she had to stay late for a team meeting. But when I casually checked the company website, it showed her office closed early that day for renovations. I didn't confront her. Instead, I noted the time she left, the time she came back, and later matched it with a rideshare receipt I found in the family email account. Destination? A restaurant 2 towns over. The driver's drop-off? A quiet suburban street where our so-called neighbor lived. That discovery felt like a knife in my chest. But instead of screaming, I smiled at her the next morning and asked how her meeting went. She gave me a rehearsed answer about office stress. I nodded, kissed her forehead, and mentally added one more nail to the coffin she was building for herself. Meanwhile, I also started protecting my son. Not from her directly, but from the storm I knew was coming. I scheduled an appointment with a child psychologist just to talk through things. Not about the affair, of course, he was too young for that. But I wanted to make sure he had a safe place, someone outside the house, where he could share his feelings. The last thing I wanted was for him to carry guilt over something that wasn't his fault. The more I dug, the uglier it became. Jewelry boxes tucked into drawers, clothes I'd never seen before hidden in shopping bags, even perfume receipts billed to our joint account. I built a folder on my laptop, password protected, where I saved photos, receipts, and notes. She thought she was being clever, but she was careless. The evidence piled up like bricks, and I was slowly building the wall that would surround her lies. One night, I caught a glimpse of her phone as she stepped out of the room. The screen lit up, and there it was, his name. Not a contact saved with a fake title, not even disguised. Just his first name, bold and shameless. She came back into the room, grabbed her phone like it was a lifeline, and muttered something about work. I didn't call her out. Instead, I memorized the number. The next day, I called the number from a different phone. He answered. The sound of his voice made my skin crawl. I didn't say a word. I just hung up. But that 30-second confirmation told me everything I needed. This wasn't a fling with a stranger in another city. It was right here. It was personal. And it was dangerous to ignore. Why now? I had enough to make a scene, to flip the whole table and watch their world burn. But I wasn't ready. I wanted this to be airtight. Not just an angry husband's rant, but a strategy so flawless that when the truth came out, there would be no escaping it. Not for her, not for him. That's when I expanded my search. I reached out to a private investigator, framing it as a property dispute. I didn't mention my wife yet. I just wanted to know if this guy, our friendly neighbor, had secrets of his own. And let me tell you, he did. More than I could have imagined. The investigator dug into public records, social media, even HOA documents. What came back made my jaw drop. This man, the one who smiled at my son, who waved at me over his lawn mower, wasn't just sneaking around with my wife. He was also skimming money from the neighborhood association, pushing votes to line his own pockets, and pretending to be a perfect family man while living a double life. And suddenly, I realized something important. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. This was about two liars who thought they could rewrite reality. My wife thought she could erase me as a father. He thought he could manipulate a whole community. That was the moment my pain shifted into something else. Purpose. I wasn't just documenting an affair anymore. I was preparing to dismantle two people who had built their worlds on lies. And the best part? They still thought I was blind. The deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't just an affair. It was a whole performance, carefully staged to keep me in the dark. But I wasn't just the audience anymore. I was writing the script that I started building a timeline. Every late night meeting, every unexplained purchase, every Uber ride, I logged them all. I even matched phone calls from her bill with timestamps from credit card charges. Piece by piece, I connected the dots until it looked less like coincidence and more like choreography. For example, one Friday she left the house at 6, claiming she had to help with a project at work. At 6:15, her phone bill showed a call to him. At 6:40, our bank account showed a charge for wine and steak at a restaurant halfway between his house and her office. At 9:10, another Uber receipt, destination, his neighborhood. And at 11:47, her text to me. Heading home now, don't wait up. Reading those words while knowing exactly where she was, it was brutal. But instead of confronting her, I kept smiling, nodding, pretending nothing was wrong. Every lie she told became another line in the case I was building. I didn't stop with her. I dug into him too. His job, his HOA involvement, even his family. On the outside, he looked like the picture of respectability. Wife, 2 kids, perfect lawn, active in the community. But under the surface, there were cracks. Late-night social media activity that didn't match his business trips. Complaints filed quietly in HOA records about missing funds. And the private investigator confirmed what I suspected. This man wasn't just cheating. He was using his influence in ways that could blow up in his face if exposed. That gave me an idea. If I played my cards right, this wouldn't just be a personal revenge story. It would be a reckoning on multiple fronts. My wife and her lover weren't just going to lose me. They were going to lose everything they had built on lies. But before I could even think about bringing the hammer down, I had to stay careful. One wrong move, and she'd know I was onto her. So I made sure to act like the perfect husband. I cooked dinner, asked about her day, even rubbed her shoulders when she looked stressed. Inside, every touch felt like acid, but on the outside, I made it look like I was still blind. Meanwhile, I became more strategic with my evidence. Screenshots weren't enough. I started forwarding emails and receipts to a secure folder, one she couldn't access. I even created a backup on a flash drive, hidden in my office drawer at work. If she ever tried to lock me out of accounts, I'd still have everything. One of the hardest moments came when my son asked if the new dad was going to come over soon. My heart dropped, but I kept my composure. I gently asked him why he thought that. He said, "Mom told me not to tell you, but she said we'd all live together one day." That sentence alone nearly broke me. Not because of the betrayal. I'd already accepted that. But because she was rewriting my role in my son's life before I was even gone. That wasn't just cheating. That was erasure. After he went to bed, I sat alone again, staring at that flash drive in my hand. I thought about how easily I could expose her right then and there. But I didn't. Timing was everything. If I wanted this to be undeniable, it had to be complete. So I expanded the timeline even further. I tracked her patterns. Mondays she stayed late. Wednesdays she had girls' nights. Fridays she mysteriously got exhausted and went to bed early after coming home late. Each excuse matched perfectly with his schedule. And the PI confirmed they weren't just meeting for dinners. They were spending hours at hotels near his office, hotels that offered corporate discounts. The receipts told the story better than I ever could. Why now? My folder of evidence was thick enough to ruin both of them. And I hadn't even used the biggest card in my hand yet, the drawing. That innocent piece of paper, signed and dated by my son, was the most damning evidence of all. It proved she wasn't just cheating. She was planting seeds in my child's head, preparing him for a world where I didn't exist. That I knew I had to be smart. I couldn't just walk into court and scream affair. Judges see that all the time. But what they don't ignore is manipulation of a child. That was where her arrogance was going to destroy her. So I waited. I smiled. I documented. And in the background, I started making quiet connections. People in the HOA who disliked him. Colleagues of hers who might not cover for her when the truth came out. Because when the time came, I wasn't going to just expose them. I was going to dismantle them. And the best part? They still believed I had no idea. By the time my evidence folder was overflowing, I realized I wasn't just tracking my wife's lies anymore. I was unraveling a web. And right in the middle of it was our so-called friendly neighbor. He wasn't just a man sneaking around with someone else's wife. He was a man building a whole second life on deception. The private investigator gave me a report that read more like a thriller novel than a background check. Apparently, Mr. Perfect Family Man had more skeletons in his closet than I could count. First, there were the finances. As treasurer of our HOA, he had access to community funds. And sure enough, the investigator found irregularities, money allocated for repairs that mysteriously disappeared, fake invoices paid to shell companies, all traced back to him. I read those pages with a mixture of disgust and excitement. This wasn't just about catching my wife cheating anymore. This was about dismantling a man who thought he could fool an entire community. But that wasn't even the worst of it. His own marriage was crumbling behind closed doors. His wife had already filed a quiet complaint about severe trust issues in their household. Nothing public yet, but it was there, a fracture waiting to split wide open. And here he was, smiling at block parties, grilling burgers, waving at everyone like he was the neighborhood hero. while secretly plotting to step into my son's life as if he could just erase me. The more I learned, the colder my strategy became. This wasn't going to be a screaming match on the driveway. This was going to be a takedown, clean, precise, and devastating to S.O. I dug deeper. I learned that his business trips overlapped perfectly with my wife's late-night meetings. They even booked hotel rooms under his company account, another thread I knew could unravel his carefully constructed mask. If that got out, not only would his wife know, but his employer might start asking questions too. I remember one particular evening. My wife was getting ready for another girls' night. I watched her put on a dress I had never seen before, spray perfume I knew wasn't bought with my money, and glance at her phone with that little smirk she thought I didn't notice. I wanted to confront her so badly right then. But instead, I asked if she needed me to watch our son while she was out. She gave me a dismissive smile and said, "Don't wait up." The second the door closed behind her, I made a call. Not to her, not to him, but to the investigator. I wanted confirmation of her location. An hour later, I had it. She was with him at yet another hotel. Same routine, different night. And this time, I had photos. Seeing those pictures hurt more than I can describe. But they also fueled me. Because now, I had undeniable proof. And I knew exactly how to use it. What made it almost surreal was how normal she acted around me afterward. The next morning, she was cheerful, humming while she made coffee, kissing me on the cheek like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I had an entire file sitting in my desk drawer that could destroy her world in one click. That contrast, her pretending everything was fine while I quietly built the case against her, became my secret weapon. The more she lied, the more I smiled. The more she smirked at her phone, the more evidence I saved. She thought she was ahead of me. In reality, she was walking straight into the trap I was setting. The neighbor, too, had no clue. I still waved at him when I saw him outside. Sometimes we'd even exchange small talk about lawn care or neighborhood updates. And every time I shook his hand, I thought about the day I'd pull the rug out from under him. But I wasn't rushing. Timing was everything. If I exposed them too soon, she'd play the victim and he'd slip away. If I waited too long, they might blindside me legally. I needed the perfect balance. So I kept collecting, kept smiling, and kept planning. Because when I finally revealed what I knew, it wasn't just going to be a scandal. It was going to be a collapse of their affair, of his reputation, and of every lie they'd told to keep their secret alive. And the best part? Neither of them suspected a thing. By this point, the evidence was undeniable. My wife wasn't just sneaking around. She was rewriting our lives behind my back. And as much as it tore me apart, my focus shifted from her lies to something far more important. My son, that he was the innocent one in all of this. The only one who didn't understand the storm swirling around him. And the thought of him being used as a pawn in their little fantasy made my blood run cold. If I was going to play this game, then protecting him had to be my top priority. So I started making small changes at home. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would tip her off, just subtle adjustments. I created a new routine with him. Dinners together, bedtime stories, Saturday morning walks. I wanted him to feel grounded, safe, and connected to me. If she was trying to introduce another man as a new dad, then I was going to make sure my son never forgot who his real father was. I also reached out to a child psychologist. Not to expose what was happening. He was too young for that. But to give him a safe place to express himself. Kids notice things adults don't think they notice, and I wanted him to have someone neutral to talk to. The sessions gave me peace of mind. Every week, I got a little feedback, and it became clear. He loved me, he trusted me, and he wanted me in his life. That was all I needed to hear. Meanwhile, inside the house, I had to play two roles, the loving dad and the clueless husband. My wife thought I was still blind, still wrapped up in my own world. She had no idea that every smile, every fake excuse, every late night was another nail in her coffin. One evening, my son drew another picture. This time, it was of us, just him and me, fishing by a lake. He gave it to me with a shy smile and said, "This is just us, Dad." I nearly broke down right there. But instead, I hugged him and told him I'd always be there, no matter what. That moment sealed my resolve. I wasn't just collecting evidence for myself anymore. I was building a case for him, to make sure no one could rip me out of his life. At the same time, I started thinking about boundaries. If the confrontation came, I couldn't afford chaos. I couldn't afford shouting matches or scenes that could be twisted against me. I needed a plan that was calm, calculated, and legally bulletproof. So I quietly set up separate accounts, started moving small amounts of money into a place she couldn't touch, and documented every expense. If she tried to blindside me with financial games, I'd be ready. But the hardest part was pretending everything was normal. Imagine sitting across from someone at dinner, watching them laugh, knowing they're planning a future without you. She thought she was clever, sneaking glances at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd watch her fingers type out messages and then tuck the phone away with that smug little grin. And every time she smiled at the screen, I told myself, smile back. Pretend. Wait, the patience nearly killed me. But I knew the payoff would be worth it. Meanwhile, the private investigator sent me something new. Photos of her and the neighbor in a grocery store. Not sneaking, not hiding, but shopping together like a married couple. Picking out fruit, laughing in the aisle, like they had already built a life together. And that's when it hit me. They weren't planning this as some temporary fling. They were building a replacement reality, one where I didn't exist. That thought made me colder than I've ever felt in my life. But it also sharpened my focus. Because if they wanted to play house, I was going to bring the house crashing down. The first step was setting boundaries, and not for them, but for myself. I promised myself I wouldn't explode, no matter how much it hurt. I wouldn't let my anger ruin my case. When the time came, I'd present my evidence with calm precision, leaving no room for excuses, no cracks for her to crawl through. And as I tucked my son into bed that night, I whispered to myself, she thinks I'm powerless. She thinks I'm blind. But she has no idea I'm already 10 steps ahead, because the truth was, I wasn't waiting for her to confess. I was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And that moment was coming soon. That I had spent weeks collecting evidence, smiling through clenched teeth, pretending to be blind. But the time had come for the first crack in the mask. I wasn't going to reveal everything yet, not the photos, not the investigator's report, just enough to let her know the walls were closing in. It happened on a Sunday morning. She was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone with a fake smile, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. Our son was upstairs, playing with his toys. I walked in quietly and placed a single sheet of paper on the table in front of her. The drawing. She froze. Her eyes flicked to mine, then back to the page, then to me again. What's this? She asked, her voice a little too calm. You tell me, I said. My voice wasn't angry, not loud, just steady. He drew you and someone else holding hands. He crossed me out, and he wrote, in his own words, this will be our new dad. Her face drained of color. She tried to laugh it off. Kids imagine things. You know how they are. I cut her off. Don't insult me like that. He didn't imagine this. He heard it from you. For the first time in weeks, I watched her mask crack. Her lips trembled. Her eyes darted around like she was searching for an escape route. But I didn't let up. I'm going to ask you one question, I said, leaning forward. Who is he? She opened her mouth, closed it again, then whispered, I don't know what you're talking about. That lie hit me harder than the truth would have. Because I had the truth. The receipts, the calls, the photos, everything. But I wasn't ready to play all my cards yet. Instead, I slid another piece of paper across the table, a printout of her phone bill. One name repeated dozens of times. Late at night, early in the morning. Still don't know what I'm talking about. I asked. Her face hardened. She sat up straighter, like she'd finally decided on a strategy. You're overreacting. He's just a friend. We talked, that's all. A friend. I said, raising an eyebrow. Do friends book hotel rooms together under his company account? Do friends tell children that their real father is going to be replaced? That broke her composure completely. She slammed her hand on the table. Fine. Maybe I'm not happy. Maybe I deserve better than this life where you watch me like a prison guard. I stayed calm. That was the key. No yelling, no anger. Just cold, hard facts. You can tell yourself whatever you want, I said. But here's what's real. I know what you've been doing. And if you think you're going to erase me from my son's life, you're dead wrong. She tried to stand, but I put my hand on the drawing, holding it down on the table. This, I said quietly, is going to follow you. You involved him in your lies. You dragged our son into your affair. That's the line you crossed. And that's the one thing I will never forgive. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel pity. Not anymore. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm not blowing this up today. I'm not shouting or packing bags. You're going to think about your next move. Because when the truth comes out, and it will, you won't get to control the story." She just sat there, staring at me, clutching her coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. That I stood up, took the drawing back, and walked out of the room. My son's laughter echoed from upstairs, innocent and untouched by the poison she had poured into our lives. In that moment, I made a silent promise. I was going to protect him at all costs. And when the time came, I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to expose both of them. Completely. This wasn't the climax. Not yet. This was just the warning shot. The storm was still building, and she had no idea how destructive it was going to be. After that first confrontation, the house felt like a battlefield, only no one was firing weapons yet. My wife walked on eggshells, trying to act normal, but I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew I wasn't blind anymore. What she didn't know was just how much I had already uncovered. That I kept my distance. I didn't press her for answers, didn't beg or threaten. That silence was more powerful than any shouting match. Because while she sat there wondering how much I knew, I was already moving my pieces into position. The first call I made wasn't to her. It was to the neighbor's wife. She deserved to know the truth. I didn't come at her with accusations. Instead, I asked her if she'd noticed her husband's late nights, the business trips that didn't quite add up. She hesitated, then admitted she had doubts for months. That was all I needed. That I didn't dump everything on her at once. I gave her one thing: a copy of the phone bill showing her husband and my wife calling each other dozens of times a week. Her silence on the other end of the line said it all. Before she hung up, she whispered, "Thank you for confirming what I already knew." That was the first domino. Next, I looked at his involvement with the HOA. The private investigator had already uncovered shady transactions, but I needed more. So I quietly reached out to two other neighbors who had complained about missing funds before. Over coffee at a local diner, I mentioned some of the rumors I'd heard about how money was disappearing. I didn't accuse, I just planted seeds. By the end of the conversation, they were ready to dig deeper on their OW, and it wasn't long before word started spreading. Small whispers at neighborhood meetings, people looking at him differently, asking more questions about where the money had gone. He didn't know it yet, but his carefully polished reputation was already starting to crack. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to my wife's workplace. I didn't want to destroy her career, not yet, but I needed leverage. So I made a quiet call to her HR department, framing it as a concern. I asked if they were aware that company resources, including expense accounts, were being used for meetings that had nothing to do with work. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. I knew they'd start watching. Now the walls were closing in from three sides: his marriage, his HOA, and her job at home. I kept playing my role. I cooked dinner, smiled, even cracked jokes at the table. She probably thought I was backing down, that maybe my confrontation had just been a bluff. But every time she picked up her phone and smirked at the screen, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Because I knew her secret world was collapsing, and she didn't even see it yet. One night, I caught her sneaking outside to take a call. I stayed back, listening from the shadows of the hallway. Her voice was low, urgent. "He knows something," she said. "I don't know how much, but no, I can't just leave yet. Not until we figure it out." Those words didn't hurt me. They energized me. She wasn't planning to confess. She was planning to manage me, to keep me in the dark while she plotted her next move. That confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't going to stop until I forced her to. And forcing her meant hitting where it hurt most: the fantasy life she thought she could build with him. The next morning, I wrote an anonymous letter. Nothing dramatic, nothing incriminating to me. Just a simple set of questions typed out and slipped into the HOA mailbox. Where are the funds for last quarter's maintenance project? Why were invoices paid to companies that don't exist? How many conflicts of interest are being hidden from homeowners? It wasn't signed, but it didn't have to be. Once people saw it, they'd start pulling threads. And I knew exactly who they'd find at the center of the mess. By this point, I had built 3 separate fronts of pressure. I hadn't revealed my evidence yet, but I didn't need to. The truth was starting to leak into their lives from every angle. And as I tucked my son into bed that night, I felt a strange calm. The storm was coming. They thought they could build a future by erasing me. But I was about to erase their entire lie. This wasn't revenge born of anger anymore. It was justice, carefully delivered. and they had no idea how close they were to losing everything. The silence in my house was almost eerie now. My wife still went through the motions, cooking, small talk, even laughing at shows on TV, but it all felt forced. She wasn't comfortable anymore, not like before. And I knew why. The walls I had built around her lies were starting to close in. Her job. Things had shifted. I knew because she started coming home frustrated, snapping at little things. One night, she threw her purse on the couch and muttered, "They're watching me like I'm under investigation." I didn't react. I simply asked, "Why would they do that?" She gave me a glare sharp enough to cut glass, then turned away without answering. That told me everything I needed to know. HR must have started looking into her expense reports. I didn't have to say a word. Her own behavior was doing the damage for me. Meanwhile, the HOA was buzzing with tension. The anonymous letter I had planted spread like wildfire. Suddenly, neighbors were asking questions during meetings, demanding transparency. The treasurer, my wife's lover, was sweating bullets. His once cocky smile was gone, replaced with clipped answers and defensive remarks. I even overheard him one day while I was out walking the dog. He was on the phone, pacing in his driveway. "No, they don't have proof," he snapped. "Just rumors. I'll handle it." He sounded less like a confident leader and more like a man about to drown. And then there was his wife. She didn't say much to me after our first conversation, but I noticed her demeanor change. She stopped waving at me politely. She stopped wearing her wedding ring. She kept her distance from him at community events. The crack in their marriage was widening, and all I had done was show her a single phone billed home. My wife was unraveling. She thought she was hiding it, but I saw the way she stared off at nothing, the way she jumped when her phone buzzed. One night, I heard her crying quietly in the bathroom. Not because she felt guilty. No, she was crying because she was losing control that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered my son's words. "Mom said this will be our new dad." That reminder hardened me again. I wasn't just exposing an affair. I was defending my place as his father that I began preparing for the next step, the real strike. I organized the evidence I had into 3 separate files. One for the lawyer, one for HR at her job, and one for the HOA board. Each file was complete, airtight, undeniable. If she tried to spin the story, the facts would crush her narrative before it even started. And through it all, I stayed calm. That was the part that unsettled her the most. She wanted me angry, yelling, making mistakes. Instead, I smiled at dinner, played with my son, and carried on like nothing was wrong. The more normal I acted, the more paranoid she became at one point. She cornered me in the kitchen. "Why are you so calm?" she demanded. Most men would be screaming right now. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Because screaming won't change the truth." She froze, searching my face for some hint of weakness. But I gave her nothing. Just calm, steady silence. That night, I caught her pacing in the backyard, whispering into her phone. "He's not reacting," she said. "I think he knows everything." "No, I don't know how much. Just be careful." I almost laughed. She still didn't realize how careful I was being. The beauty of it was that I didn't need to attack directly. The cracks were spreading on their own. She was under pressure at work. He was under fire in the neighborhood. Their secret alliance was turning into a liability for both of them. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to push and watch their entire world collapse. Because the truth wasn't just coming. It was already here. And when the final blow landed, it wouldn't just be an affair exposed. It would be the complete destruction of the false reality they had tried to build. The countdown had begun. The day of the special HOA meeting felt electric. Normally, those gatherings were dull talks about pool hours or parking complaints. But this time, the room buzzed with whispers. Everyone had come for one reason. Money was missing, and all eyes were on the treasurer, my wife's new future. I slipped into the back row, folder in hand, silent observer. He walked in wearing a crisp suit, smile plastered on like glue. He shook hands, cracked jokes, pretending nothing was wrong. But even from where I sat, I could see the sweat on his temples. The board president opened with formalities. Then came the first question. "Can you provide receipts for last quarter's maintenance budget?" His answer was vague. "They're filed. Just a clerical delay." Another board member pressed. "We've reviewed the bank records. The numbers don't add up. Where's the missing $8,000? He shifted in his seat, voice sharper. "That's taken out of context. These are complex accounts. A woman from the second row, a retired accountant, stood and held up a binder. I compared your reports with the actual bank statements. Payments were made to companies that don't exist. Care to explain? The room fell silent. His smile twitched, then vanished. People started murmuring, glancing at one another. The board president leaned forward. Given the irregularities, we're moving to suspend you as treasurer pending a full audit. Hand shot up. The vote was quick. Unanimous, he tried to argue, voice cracking. This is political. It's rumors. But the president's reply cut him down. No, it's documentation. That was the moment the crowd turned. The same neighbors who used to wave at him now stared with suspicion, whispering about lies and money. His wife sat stiff in the corner, arms crossed, wedding ring gone. She didn't defend him. She didn't even look at him. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Watching him squirm under the weight of his own lies was more satisfying than any shouting match. When the meeting adjourned, he bolted for the door, avoiding eye contact. As he passed me, his jaw clenched. He knew I had a hand in this, but he couldn't prove it. And that was the beauty of it. I never raised my voice, never through accusations. I just let the truth speak. Walking home that night, I felt the shift. The affair wasn't a private fantasy anymore. The world was starting to see him for what he really was. His reputation was fractured, his position gone. His wife watching him with cold detachment. The walls had finally cracked, and soon, they were going to collapse completely. When the dust settled, everything looked different. The neighbor was stripped of his HOA position. The audit uncovered more than just clerical errors. His reputation in the neighborhood was shattered. His wife filed for separation, and the man who once strutted down the street with a smug smile now avoided eye contact with everyone. He wasn't a new dad. He wasn't anyone's hero. He was a man whose lies had finally caught up with him. That my wife didn't fare much better. HR had flagged her expense reports, and although she didn't lose her job immediately, she was demoted, put under strict review, and whispered about in the office. At home, the silence between us turned into paperwork. We agreed on a custody schedule, supervised, structured, with my son's well-being at the center. She tried to fight for more, but the evidence I'd quietly built was impossible to ignore. The psychologist's notes, the drawing, the timeline, all of it painted a clear picture. The judge sided with me, granting me primary custody. She wasn't erased from our son's life, but she could no longer control the narrative. The fantasy she tried to script was dead, and me? I didn't fall apart. I rebuilt. Slowly, carefully, but stronger than before. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to process everything with clarity. I hit the gym again, focused on my career, and carved out a stable routine for my son. Saturday mornings became our ritual: fishing, pancakes, or just throwing a ball in the yard. Nothing dramatic. Just normal, steady, honest life. One night, months later, he handed me another drawing. This time it wasn't a new dad or a crossed-out face. It was me and him, side by side, smiling under a big yellow sun. He said, "I like this family better." That drawing didn't hurt. It healed. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I should have confronted her earlier, if I should have blown everything up the moment I saw that first drawing. But then I remember, if I had done that, I might have lost everything in the chaos. By staying calm, by documenting, by waiting for the right moment, I didn't just survive. I won. And today, I live peacefully with my son, free from the lies, stronger than I ever thought I could be. But let me ask you this: did I do the right thing? Was staying cold and strategic the best move? Or should I have confronted her sooner? What would you have done in my place? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more true stories like this. Hit the like button if you were hooked till the end, and drop a comment below. I want to hear what you would have done in this situation, because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, and absolutely final.